So I'm here at the South Carolina State House, where many of us just came out of hearing testimony by members of the community, by educators, about the bill that was presented to the Education Subcommittee in the Black Building by Representative Felder. Representative Felder gave a bit of summary rhetoric about what this bill was to include.
We drafted the final committee bill after months of hard work and after many versions. In this bill, everything any person wanted, or even any group, did not get entirely everything. It is a compromise to promote transparency and integrity in our education in the great state of South Carolina. House Bill 3728 uses the term fact-based. Previously, we have used the word impartial. It has clearer language. It addresses the discussion over the course of 4 committee meetings in 2022. The meetings lasted a total of nearly 20 hours and over 80 people testified. The bill has 3 main concepts. The first concept is the statement of the General Assembly's intentions. Public education should be a fair and open system where teachers, parents, educators, and the community are valued and included. The second concept is that instruction should be non-biased and include the broad scope of history, both the inspirational history and the shameful history of our great country. The State Department of Education must create and make model lesson plans accessible and available to our districts. The material must be age appropriate for our students. The third concept is the creation of a uniform complaint process and procedure that is fair to students, parents, and teachers. Disagreements should be resolved at the local level, but the legislation has an appeals process to the state board be established. What the bill does not do. The bill does not discuss student feelings or use subjective language. The former superintendent and others stressed that language prohibiting teachers from making students feel uncomfortable would stifle instruction and be difficult. The language is not in this bill. Instead, teaching and instructional materials must not promote or demean a particular race, sex, ethnicity, religion, or national origin. The bill does not prevent teaching of controversial topics. Instead, it specifically provides that schools can teach the history of ethnic groups as described in our state standards. The bill does not cause extra work for teachers. The committee learned that course syllabi is already provided to parents and students at the beginning of the courses. The bill merely affirms what should be in the syllabi. Because every district has a learning management system, it has never been easier for schools to post instructional materials that are used in our classrooms. Teachers are not punished for teaching controversial subjects. Teachers can face disciplinary action if they fail to teach those concepts in a fair and impartial manner. But the bill gives teachers a process for a fair appeal. All parties are given an understandable and equitable system for resolving their differences. The bill establishes a transparent policy for teachers, parents, and students to maintain a high-quality education, not clouded by bias on race, ethnicity, class, nationality, religion, or geographic origin. Parents, teachers, students, and our constituents in the great state of South Carolina will benefit from the deliberative work of many. The legislation is not 100% of what any one person or one cohort wanted. It is a compromise.
I did read the bill in its entirety. I was not on the Education Committee last year. I'm not a member of this subcommittee. However, I did want to bring some things to light. Under 5929-620, I think we can all agree on the first part of the bill. When it gets to library and media content material that must be age appropriate or grade appropriate, my question is, what defines age appropriate or grade appropriate? I did not see that defined in the bill, and my reason in asking that is because if we don't define it, it creates ambiguity. I believe that leaves it up to individual interpretation. The problem with that is now anyone could file a complaint against a teacher because they have a different definition of what's age appropriate. For example, it's fact-based that African Americans were enslaved and beaten and chained. For some parents, that may be not age appropriate. And so that's my example there. Moving down to the complaint form, it says that it's a fair, accurate process. Appeals are allowed. It seems like there's a lot of protections for parents here. It prohibits retaliation for filing a complaint. I like that. But my question is, where is the protection for teachers? There's nothing in there to prohibit harassment or threats towards teachers from being named in the complaint. You may say, well, it says pending an issuance of the final order, nothing is to be leaked or given out regarding that teacher. But then again, I don't see a penalty for if somebody does that. So we're telling the board, you can't disseminate this information about teachers who were complained against, but there's no penalty in the bill to deter them from doing so. So it seems like more protections for parents and less protections for our teachers. And then just briefly on the school, the part that says 5929-670, school may not accept teaching material which contains pornography or other prohibited materials. My question there is, what defines pornography and what defines prohibited materials? Prohibited materials under what code section? Again, that's not listed, and me being an attorney, words matter, and so again, this leaves it up to individual interpretation, which may cause issues and false complaints and harassments of our teachers. And specifically, I asked the definition of pornography because while we all may agree on that, there was a Greenville County Council meeting where someone believed that a book with two women who were gay as pornographic. Again, that's their right to believe that, but again, this leaves it vague and open to individual interpretation. I think we need to define that a little more. And also, lastly, with the parental pledge of expectations. I love the idea of parents being involved. My parents were involved in my public education. My question is, if a parent does not sign the pledge, what happens to that parent? It's not defined, which means does that allow a school PTA to say, well, you can't be a part because you didn't sign the pledge? Again, these are just questions that are not addressed, in my opinion, in the language.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Representative Tedder, he addressed he asked a lot of the questions that I had as well. So although I do recognize the intent of this bill, I recognize exactly what is trying to be done, because I think we can all agree that we don't want our children to be subjected to craziness of somebody else's, decisions and somebody else's ideals and things like that. We want our kids to learn factual-based history. We want our kids to get a proper education. It's the same thing that I would like my children. One of the things that I have to talk, because my mother, I can call my mother right now, and my mother can tell you what it was like when she could not vote. She went through civil rights. And it's not so long ago like we like to claim it was. This is still stuff that's still current right now, because I can talk to my parents about this. But one of the things I have to educate my own mother on is the fact that I'm raising my children different than the way that she was raised. And me telling my mother that, hey, listen, you know, my mother, she still said, oh, that white guy over there, that Mexican over there, that Asian over there. And I have to talk to my own mother to say, hey, no, that's a person over there, that person, that man, that woman. So I get the intent of what we're trying to do. However, the way we are doing it is only going to add fear to the instructors that we are already losing in this state. We are already losing instructors. And my question to everybody in here is, how many teachers did you speak to before you came up with this bill? How many town halls did you hold before you came up with this? How many superintendents did you speak to before you came up with this bill? And that's the thing right there, because every teacher that I've talked to has said the same thing that I'm saying, that they understand the intent, that they want this information to come out the way it's supposed to come out, but they are afraid that if this bill is passed, there's some things that they're gonna have to shy away from, just because we have a lot of people in this state that, and y'all have seen at some of these school board meetings, where people start to throw out crazy claims and these crazy conspiracy theories and start to, what is going to be the remedy for people who are going to start throwing out these claims based on this new policy that you all have here? What's going to stop these people from going all over the state and just throwing out these crazy lies and accusing teachers of things when they just talked about Martin Luther King?
My greatest concern with H.3728 is that it will still create a more hostile work environment for our Black and queer educators, and a more hostile learning environment for children like my daughter, who is a child of color with 2 moms. A news story broke yesterday morning that a student here in Richland County attempted suicide due to bullying over their identity. Stories like this come from our failure to train educators on being sensitive to the diverse needs of their students.
My name is Ada Kraswicka, and I live in Greenville County. I urge you all to vote against House Bill 3728. This bill does not further education. Instead, it inhibits teachers and educators from doing their jobs and sets us all back. How are we supposed to teach about slavery, Jim Crow laws, or even Martin Luther King Jr. with this law in place? Our history is already so whitewashed and so diluted of the truth.
Hello everybody, my name is Mark McDonald from Charleston, South Carolina, community organizer with E3 and substitute teacher seasonally. I urge y'all to vote no on Bill 3728. Since last legislative session, I've talked with a lot of students who have been watching what's been going on here, and we've seen books and curriculum get banned all across the country, and teachers leaving the classroom in droves. I'm a substitute, I go back in like, where's everybody at? And it's a real scare that people have. Students, especially Black and Latinos, are reading far behind reading level, and on top of a growing mental health crisis. How can we keep going on like this? Our kids need to know the truth about this country and how it affects us today.
I just have a simple statement. We are really instilling fear in just our pre-service teachers and service teachers. My job is to prepare new teachers to get them ready to go out into the field. And I will say, even in my first day of class, of just building a positive climate amongst my students, 2 of the questions that was on the mind of my students was these bills. So we're getting new people coming into the profession, those who even try to get in the profession, and they're already scared. We are not helping, we're hurting. We don't need a task force. We need empathy. We need thinking. We need criticality.
I am the Moms for Liberty chapter chair from Horry County, South Carolina. I'm here to bring down the temperature in the room a little bit. It sounds like many people are getting very upset when it comes to a racial issue. But I think it's extremely important to understand that history is history. Nobody's restricting you from teaching history or teaching history in the classroom. This is what the NEA and teachers unions would like to tell you. But the truth of the matter is, that's not the case. They're scaring teachers and they're leaving the profession, and not in fact because of this bill, but because of ideological ideas that they are selling to their people. However, the truth of the matter is this, is that we should care about the families in our communities. That includes Black families, Latino families, and those all from different parts of life. And what we should think about is whether we want to talk about factual history or we want to talk about other things that are our personal beliefs and bringing those personal beliefs in the classrooms.
Now, Republicans are doubling down on their position that this bill is not about removing Black history or the history of minority groups, but rather getting back to the integrity of teaching in South Carolina schools. Now, many educators had a difference of opinion when it came to this.
Members, thank you for allowing us to speak today. My name is Sherry East, and I'm a high school science teacher from Rock Hill. I'm currently serving as the president of the South Carolina Education Association. I have a lot more, but I'll be very brief. I think this bill mainly raises a lot of questions for us of what ifs. You know, what if a parent decides not to check their child's homework is in here? What if a parent doesn't go to a parent conference meeting? That's part of it. I wish you could legislate parental behavior, but we can't do that. Another is what ifs, who determines specifically what viewpoints are biases and presented as facts? What happens to the educator if that is being accused of doing something they shouldn't? Can the state revoke licensure? And who determines criteria on the library language? Are we going to allow employees to opt out of training and professional development? That's part of this, that a teacher can opt out if they don't feel comfortable with the training. That's opening a wide door.
I'm an adjunct professor at the South Carolina Honors College. I teach a course on the United States Constitution. I first started teaching the United States Constitution in 1970 at the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York. I'd like to tell you also that 60 years ago yesterday, I was the volunteer student guard for Harvey Gantt when he arrived at Clemson University. I have not read every bit of this bill. I'm not sure I know all about it, but based on what I've learned and based on what I've seen in Florida, and I believe this is somewhat similar, I believe this bill is benighted. I believe it is a bad idea. I believe that it should not be enacted in South Carolina. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kim Winslow, and I was in the business community for many years for Fortune 100 companies. And I left that and got a master's in education so I could go teach. And I love teaching, love it. Love the students, love the progress they make. I had to withdraw in order to take care of my parents, and they're now deceased. I want to go back to teaching. I love it. There's a shortage, but I cannot go back to teaching if this bill is passed. I cannot do it, and let me explain why. Let's say I make this statement right here, and I read the bill, by the way. The South entered the Civil War primarily to protect the right to slavery. Slavery violates our most sacred American principles of liberty and democracy, and the repercussions of slavery can still be felt today. That will land me in front of a board, or that will land me in court, even though every one of those statements is true, and I can defend every one of them with document after document after document.
And I'll tell you this, had these sorts of laws been on the books when I taught from 2013 until 2016, as a 21-year-old, I would have run away from the classroom. I would not have entered the classroom. And it's quite ironic to me that we have a major teacher shortage in our state. I heard the gentleman say earlier, 1,500 teachers. We sat for 2 hours and listened to presentations from educators who were doing amazing work earlier today. And they talked about many of the challenges in our state. So I find it hard to believe that we go from that, we pivot from that to a conversation, a controversial conversation that will actually run teachers away from the classroom.
Thank you, Chairman Bradley. As a new legislator here in the House, I just wanted to say a few words because of the fact that I do intend to support the bill. And everything I've heard today are things that are completely different than what I have heard for the last several years. As a matter of fact, what I've heard for the last several years, including knocking on over 4,000 doors personally in my district, which does have 2 historic settlement communities in it, which I did knock on their doors too, because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make any difference where someone lives. It doesn't make any difference their ethnicity. They are people that I serve. I heard over and over again, we want to get our education quality back to where it needs to be, or up to where it needs to be. And what I heard over and over in presentations had nothing to do with removing any of the history that has either come to light or that we knew but wasn't being shared in history books 60 or 70 years ago. I can tell you, as someone who shares the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I've been fully aware from the time I was born of his impact, and also lived for a while in a community that was right down the road from Newark, New Jersey when the race riots were happening. I am very well aware personally of the history of our country's problems, and my children and myself both went to public schools, and we learned about the ugly history as well as the good things and the things that we have to be proud of in our nation. This bill is a reaction because of the fact that over the last several years there has been so much brought up and negativity that has caused little children to go into school, and from what I have heard from parents of elementary students, have them feel as if it's their fault that these things happened. It is not any color or ethnicity or background or gender choice. It is not any of their fault that these things have happened. It is the history that it is. And so yes, we want to keep teaching history, but we want to make sure that when our children go in there, that just like Dr. King, and I know people don't always like it when you quote him if you didn't have the exact same background, but the reality is he said we should all be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. We need to go in an even playing field when children enter elementary school, and we need for children to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Thank you.
Susan Ward, and I live in Greenville County. When a similar bill was introduced last year, we often heard the Martin Luther King quote about not judging someone by the color of their skin. I'm glad this body agrees that MLK is an authority to reference in the crafting of this bill, because he also said it's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is, of course, an allusion to systemic racism, a tenet that this bill easily would ban due to its imprecise language throughout.
As we looked at Representative Garvin, as well as Representative Alexander pulling to table the bill and maybe even to adjourn the bill to just effectively kill the bill, Representative Landing made it very clear that she was in support of this bill.
I would like to move that we table H.3728 until a future date.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion before the subcommittee is whether to table House Bill 3728. Please indicate aye, nay, or not voting. Representative Alexander? Yes. Mr. Alexander votes aye. Representative Garvin?
Aye.
Mr. Garvin votes aye. Representative Hager?
No.
Mr. Hager votes nay. Representative Landing?
No.
Mr. Landing votes nay. Representative Vaughn? Nay. Mr. Vaughn votes nay. Representative Bradley?
No.
Chair votes nay by a vote of 2 to 4. The motion to table fails.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, yes, sir.
I move that we adjourn the debate.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second. Okay. So that requires a voice vote. All in favor? Let's do it by hands. Yes, sir. Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand.
I have 4 to 2 against the motion.
Okay, the motion does not carry. Again, we're calling the question of House Bill 3728, and we're going to do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question for the subcommittee is whether to report the bill favorably to the full committee. Please indicate aye, nay, or not voting. Representative Alexander? No. Mr. Alexander votes nay. Representative Garvin?
Nay.
Mr. Garvin votes nay. Representative Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Hager votes aye. Representative Landing?
Aye.
Landing votes aye. Representative Vaughn?
Aye.
Mr. Vaughn votes aye. Representative Bradley?
Aye.
Mr. Bradley votes aye by a vote of 4 to 2. The bill is reported favorably to the committee.
So ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Josh Malkin from the ACLU. Now, you were just sitting in on the education subcommittee.
I sure was.
Okay, what was your experience like being inside of there on today?
I think for the most part it was really empowering. You know, there are 25 people speaking and 24 of them all voiced very powerful opposition to the bill. A lot of different points, a lot of, eloquent, passionate, powerful points were brought up. These folks, I'm hoping that these folks are doing their due diligence and doing their research, not only to see what's going on locally and around the country, but also checking with their constituents. This is an issue that, there's some folks are very loud about, but the majority of South Carolinians do not want an attack on educators, do not want an attack on students, and do not want an attack on the majority of parents who want their children to have access to a high quality, truthful education.
Well, what I heard is the voice of the people, but it wasn't listened to. It fell on deaf ears, so that was a major theme throughout. I believe out of 30 people, 25 to 30 people who commented, only one person was for the bill, everybody else was against it, so I thought that spoke volumes to what the public thinks about it. However, unfortunately, the legislators who wanted to push forward the bill did so without, any concern for the community. We heard a lot of, ongoing tropes about wanting to espouse be MLK-like, but not really understanding what MLK was actually fighting for. So we saw a lot of misconstruing of the facts. And
you're referring to Representative Landing.
Exactly.
That mentioned that she shared a birthday.
So she know all about his experience, apparently, from what she said, which obviously is not true.
How do you feel about her stating that in her district, she had knocked on over 4,000 doors and discussed with constituents the need to get back to education or quality education? Do you think she was saying that South Carolina schools aren't quality? And what do you think she meant by that?
Well, I think it's something that a lot of people have understand that, like, South Carolina needs to have better education. That's one thing I could agree on. Like, I agree the education needs to be better, but the way they're doing it is a way that's only going to scare teachers. A teacher's teacher said that exact same thing. You're only making people want to leave this state and go different places by making these bills. So it's not going to make education better. It's really just going to create more reasons for teachers to want to leave the profession and feel fearful on what they say and how they teach.